He was on his way to propose to another woman, then saw a child through the car window who looked exactly like him. Ethan Collins believed in forward motion. His life had been built on the idea that hesitation was weakness and that looking back only slowed progress. As the CEO of a rapidly expanding company, a self-made millionaire whose name appeared regularly in business magazines, he was admired for his decisiveness and feared for the same reason. He did not dwell on mistakes, because he preferred to see them as necessary steps toward something better. That afternoon, everything was moving exactly according to plan. The city passed outside his car windows in familiar patterns of glass, traffic, and late afternoon light. His phone rested face down in the center console, deliberately ignored for once, while the small velvet box on the passenger seat seemed to radiate significance far beyond its size. Inside it was a ring chosen after weeks of consideration, not because of doubt, but because Ethan wanted everything to be perfect. Tonight, he would propose. Tonight, he would close another chapter and open a new one, cleaner and more predictable than the last. He told himself this was happiness. As he drove, his thoughts drifted briefly to the woman waiting for him, to the dinner reservation, to the words he had rehearsed enough times that they no longer sounded emotional, only correct. He liked that feeling. Control had always been his version of safety. Love, when it fit neatly into plans, was acceptable. When it didn't, it became a liability. The traffic light ahead turned red near a small park he barely noticed anymore. Ethan slowed, his foot easing onto the brake, his gaze lifting without intention toward the rows of trees and the worn benches beyond the sidewalk. Children's laughter carried faintly through the closed windows, distant and irrelevant, part of a world he had long decided did not belong to him. Then his eyes caught on something that made his breath stop. At the edge of the park stood a woman with light hair pulled back loosely, her posture relaxed but protective. She held a small boy in her arms, the child's face half hidden against her shoulder as he laughed at something only he understood. For a split second, Ethan's mind rejected what his eyes were telling him, offering excuses instead. Someone similar. A coincidence. Memory playing tricks. But the longer he looked, the less room there was for denial. Lily. The name surfaced before he consciously allowed it to, bringing with it a sharp, unexpected ache. He had not thought of her in years, not truly. In his mind, she belonged to a closed chapter, one he had sealed carefully with assumptions that made everything easier to live with. He had believed she left because she was unhappy, because she wanted something simpler, because she found someone else who could give her what he never intended to. He had never questioned that story. The child shifted in her arms, lifting his head just enough for Ethan to see his face clearly. Brown hair. Brown eyes. A familiar seriousness behind the laughter that struck him with a force he could not explain. The resemblance was subtle, but undeniable, threading through features Ethan had seen every morning in the mirror for decades. His heart began to pound, not from fear, but from a sudden, terrifying clarity. The light turned green. Cars behind him began to move, horns sounding impatiently, but Ethan remained frozen, his hands gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. The future he had been so certain about moments earlier cracked silently, splitting under the weight of a single image he could not unsee. Without fully understanding why, he pulled the car to the side of the road and turned off the engine. The velvet box with the ring remained untouched on the seat, forgotten, suddenly meaningless. Ethan opened the door and stepped out into the noise of the city, his focus locked on the park ahead. Every step toward it felt unreal, as though he were walking into someone else's life, someone else's truth. He did not know what he would say or what he hoped to hear. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever waited for him by that park was about to change everything he thought he knew about his past, and everything he believed he was building for his future. Ethan crossed the street with a strange sense of detachment, as if his body were moving faster than his mind could follow. The sounds of traffic, the distant voices, even the warmth of the air seemed muted, pushed to the edges of his awareness. His attention was fixed entirely on Lily and the child in her arms, on the way she shifted her weight slightly to keep the boy comfortable, on how natural and practiced the movement looked. Lily noticed him when he was still several steps away. At first, her expression was neutral, almost absent, until recognition settled in. Her eyes widened slightly, not in surprise, but in something closer to resignation. She did not smile, and she did not turn away. Instead, she straightened instinctively, one arm tightening around the child, the other resting protectively along his back. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything that had never been said and everything that suddenly demanded to be acknowledged. Ethan searched her face for anger, for accusation, for anything that might prepare him for what was coming. He found none of it. Lily looked calm, almost distant, as if she had already lived through this moment in her own mind long before it ever happened. "Ethan," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Hearing his name in her voice again unsettled him more than he expected. It sounded different now, stripped of warmth and expectation, grounded in reality rather than memory. He swallowed, unsure how to respond, his gaze drifting back to the child despite himself. The boy had turned to look at him openly now, his curiosity unfiltered. His brown eyes studied Ethan with the same seriousness Lily had once used when she listened more than she spoke. The resemblance tightened painfully in Ethan's chest, each detail confirming what his instincts were already screaming. "How old is he?" Ethan asked, his voice low and rough, as though the words had to fight their way out. Lily hesitated only a fraction of a second. 2, she answered. The number landed heavily between them, reshaping years into something painfully precise. Ethan did the math without effort, the timeline arranging itself with cruel efficiency. 2 years ago, Lily had already been gone. 2 years ago, he had been certain his life was moving forward exactly as planned. "He's beautiful," Ethan said, the words leaving him before he could stop them. Lily's expression softened briefly, though her guard did not lower. "His name is Noah." Noah continued to watch Ethan closely, unafraid but cautious, as though sensing the importance of the moment without understanding it. He reached up to touch Lily's hair, a small, absent gesture that spoke volumes about their bond. "Does he?" Ethan began, then stopped, uncertain how to finish the question without crossing a line he had no right to approach yet. Lily understood anyway. "He knows he has a father," she said calmly. "He just didn't know it was you." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of that truth pressing down on him. He had always believed that absence was a kind of protection, that not being involved was better than being involved badly. Standing there now, he realized how fragile that belief had always been. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked away, her gaze drifting toward the park where children were playing, where life continued without regard for the quiet fracture happening beside the sidewalk. "Because when I tried to talk to you back then, you didn't listen," she said. "You had already decided what my silence meant." Ethan remembered that time differently. He remembered being busy, distracted, confident that whatever needed to be said would wait. He had assumed clarity would arrive on its own. It never had. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," Lily continued, her tone steady but firm. "I left because I realized I was alone in something that scared me, and I knew I couldn't carry it and fight you at the same time." The honesty in her voice left no room for defense. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing every word, understanding now how much he had missed by never asking the right questions. A silence followed, not hostile, but fragile. "I was on my way to propose," Ethan admitted quietly, gesturing vaguely toward the street where his car was parked. "I didn't expect." Lily met his eyes again, something unreadable passing through her expression. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said. There was no bitterness in her voice, only distance. Noah shifted in her arms, growing restless, and Lily adjusted him automatically. The moment was ending, slipping away before Ethan felt ready to let it go. "Can I see him again?" he asked, the question leaving him with more vulnerability than he had allowed himself in years. Lily studied him carefully, not as the man she once loved, but as the man standing in front of her now. "That depends on what you want," she said. "And whether you're willing to stay, even when it's not convenient." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I am." For the first time since he stepped out of his car, something like hope flickered quietly between them, uncertain but undeniable, as the past finally began to loosen its grip on the present. That evening, Ethan did not return to the car for a long time. He stood across the street, watching from a distance as Lily walked away with Noah, her pace unhurried but purposeful, as if she were protecting the fragile balance of her life by refusing to linger. The child rested his head on her shoulder now, tired, his small hand tangled in her hair. The sight lodged itself deep in Ethan's chest, heavier than any boardroom loss he had ever endured. When they disappeared around the corner, the world seemed to rush back all at once. The noise of traffic, the impatience of passers-by, the vibration of his phone that he had ignored for hours. Ethan slid back into the driver's seat, staring at the velvet box still lying where it had been, untouched and suddenly absurd. He did not open it. He did not need to. The future it represented no longer belonged to him. He drove aimlessly for a while, letting the city blur past, his thoughts looping relentlessly. Every memory of Lily replayed itself with cruel clarity. Moments he had once dismissed as insignificant now felt weighted with meaning. Her quiet pauses, the way she watched him when he spoke too quickly, the tension in her voice the last time they argued. He had called it distance. He had called it incompatibility. He had never once considered fear. By the time he reached his apartment, the sun had already begun to set. The rooms felt sterile and oversized, filled with objects chosen for comfort but never warmth. Ethan dropped his keys on the counter and stood still, listening to the silence, which now felt louder than any noise. For the first time in years, he did not know what he was supposed to do next. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it was shallow and restless, broken by images of a child's eyes staring at him with unspoken recognition. He woke before dawn with a sense of urgency he could not explain, as though time itself had begun to move differently, faster, demanding action. The next morning, Ethan made a decision that would have once felt unthinkable. He canceled his meetings. All of them. His assistant protested briefly, accustomed to a man who never deviated from schedule, but Ethan cut the conversation short. For once, business could wait. Something far more fragile required his attention. He drove past the park again, not expecting to see Lily or Noah, but needing to understand the place where everything had shifted. He sat on the same bench where Lily had stood the day before, watching parents interact with their children, noticing details he had never bothered to see. The way small hands reached instinctively for safety. The way adults bent their entire lives around those moments without complaint. Ethan realized how little he had ever noticed before. Later that day, he called Lily. His hand hovered over the screen longer than he liked to admit before he pressed her name. When she answered, her voice was calm, cautious, not surprised. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, choosing each word with care. "About what you said. About staying, even when it's not convenient." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Thinking is a start, Lily replied. But Noah doesn't need promises. He needs consistency. I know, Ethan said. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just want to be present. On your terms. Silence followed, longer this time. Ethan waited, resisting the instinct to fill it with arguments or assurances. Finally, Lily spoke again. We're going to the park tomorrow afternoon, she said. If you want to come, you can. But understand this isn't about you getting answers. It's about you showing up. I'll be there, Ethan replied without hesitation. After the call ended, he sat back, feeling both lighter and terrified. For the first time, he understood that control was not something he could impose on this situation. Whatever came next would depend not on his power or resources, but on patience, humility, and his willingness to accept a role he had never learned how to play. That night, Ethan removed the ring from its box and placed it in a drawer, not as a rejection of love, but as an acknowledgement that love could not be forced into timelines and plans. The future he thought he wanted had dissolved quietly, leaving space for something uncertain, something real. And for the first time in a very long while, Ethan did not try to fill that space immediately. He let it exist. The next afternoon arrived with a nervous anticipation that Ethan could not shake. He reached the park early, parking several blocks away and walking the rest of the distance as if slowing his arrival might give him time to prepare for something he still did not fully understand. The park looked different now, stripped of its role as a passing backdrop and transformed into a place weighted with meaning. Every bench, every tree, every patch of worn grass felt like part of a scene he had stepped into too late. He chose a spot near the path and waited, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, his posture deliberately relaxed even though his thoughts were anything but. Around him, families moved through the afternoon with casual intimacy. Parents called out warnings, children ran too far and were gently pulled back, laughter rose and fell like something natural and deserved. Ethan watched all of it with a quiet intensity, realizing how little of this world he had ever allowed himself to see. When Lily appeared, pushing Noah's stroller toward the playground, Ethan felt the same sharp jolt he had the day before, though this time it was accompanied by a steadier resolve. Lily noticed him almost immediately. She did not wave or smile, but she did not turn away either. That alone felt like permission. Noah was the first to react. He leaned forward in his stroller, pointing with unmistakable excitement. "That man," he said, his voice clear and curious. Lily paused, following his gaze, then met Ethan's eyes briefly. "Yes," she said softly. "That's him." She approached slowly, giving Noah time to process, giving Ethan space to stay where he was. When they stopped a few steps away, Lily released the stroller handle and folded her arms loosely, her posture guarded but not closed. "You came," she said. "I said I would," Ethan replied. Noah studied him openly now, his head tilted slightly, his expression thoughtful. Ethan resisted the urge to crouch or speak first, remembering Lily's words about showing up rather than performing. He waited. After a moment, Noah slid down from the stroller and took a tentative step toward him. Lily tensed instinctively but did not stop him. Ethan lowered himself slowly to one knee, bringing himself to Noah's level without invading his space. "Hi," Ethan said gently. "It's good to see you again." Noah considered him, then nodded with quiet seriousness. "You came back." "Yes," Ethan answered, feeling the weight of that observation settle heavily in his chest. "I did." That seemed to satisfy Noah, at least for the moment. He turned and ran toward the playground, his attention shifting quickly, as children's attention often does. Lily exhaled softly, a tension releasing from her shoulders that Ethan had not realized was there. They walked side by side toward a nearby bench, close enough to talk but far enough to keep the focus on Noah, who was already climbing with determined concentration. The silence between them was not awkward, but careful, filled with thoughts neither rushed to voice. "I want to be clear," Lily said eventually, her eyes fixed on her son. "This doesn't mean anything has changed yet." "I understand," Ethan replied. "I'm not here to push." Lily glanced at him briefly, searching his face for signs of impatience or defense. She found none, and that unsettled her more than she expected. For the next hour, Ethan stayed exactly where he was needed and nowhere else. He watched Noah play, responded when spoken to, and respected Lily's boundaries without comment. When Noah fell and scraped his knee, Ethan froze instinctively, then stopped himself, allowing Lily to comfort him first. Only when Noah reached out did Ethan step closer, offering a tissue and a quiet reassurance. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, something subtle shifted. Noah began to include Ethan naturally, calling out to show him a slide, waiting to see if he was watching. Ethan responded with quiet encouragement, never overstating his presence, never disappearing either. Lily noticed everything. When it was time to leave, Noah ran ahead, then stopped and turned back. "You coming again?" he asked. Ethan looked at Lily, then back at the child. "If your mom says it's okay," he replied carefully. Lily hesitated, then nodded once. "We'll see." It was not a promise, but it was not a refusal either. As they parted ways, Ethan felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. He had not solved anything. He had not reclaimed the past or secured the future. But he had shown up, exactly as he said he would, and for the first time, that felt like enough. Watching Lily and Noah walk away, Ethan understood something fundamental had changed. The measure of his life was no longer defined by what he could plan or control, but by whether he could remain present in moments that asked for patience rather than certainty. And as the park slowly emptied around him, he knew with quiet conviction that this was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's life began to rearrange itself around a rhythm he had never known before. It did not happen dramatically or all at once, but through a series of small, deliberate choices that quietly displaced everything else. Meetings were shortened, trips postponed, priorities questioned. His calendar, once packed to the minute, now had empty spaces he protected fiercely, not because he suddenly disliked work, but because something else demanded his attention in a way nothing ever had. He came to the park regularly, always at the times Lily agreed to, never early enough to pressure her and never late enough to disappoint Noah. At first, his presence was cautious, carefully measured. He sat nearby, observed, responded when invited, and stayed silent when he was not. He learned quickly that trust did not grow from explanations or apologies, but from consistency. From being there again, and then again, and then again. Noah began to recognize him not as a stranger or a curiosity, but as a familiar figure who belonged in the background of his days. He started calling Ethan over to watch him climb, asking him to push the swing a little higher, handing him small stones and broken twigs as if they were treasures. Each gesture felt monumental to Ethan, even as he pretended it was not, careful not to overwhelm the fragile balance they were building. Lily watched everything closely. She noticed how Ethan never tried to take control, how he waited for Noah to come to him rather than reaching out first. She noticed the way he listened, truly listened, when she spoke, without interrupting or offering solutions that were not asked for. It unsettled her, because it did not align with the man she remembered, the man who once believed every problem could be managed with speed and authority. One afternoon, as they sat together on a bench while Noah played nearby, Lily finally spoke the question she had been carrying silently. "You've changed," she said, her tone neutral but observant. Ethan did not deny it. "I had to," he replied. "The person I was didn't know how to stay." Lily considered this, her gaze following Noah as he ran across the grass, laughing freely. "Staying is the easy part," she said quietly. "Understanding why you left is harder." Ethan nodded slowly. He had spent many sleepless nights confronting that truth. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Not of responsibility, but of losing the version of myself I thought I needed to be. I convinced myself that distance was honesty." Lily did not respond right away. She had lived with the consequences of that fear for years, carrying them through exhaustion, uncertainty, and moments of quiet resilience Ethan had never witnessed. Forgiveness was not something she could offer lightly, even now. Later that week, she agreed to let Ethan visit their home. It was a small apartment, modest and warm, filled with signs of life rather than design. Toys scattered across the floor, drawings taped to the refrigerator, a faint smell of laundry detergent and cooked meals lingering in the air. Ethan felt an unexpected tightness in his chest as he stepped inside, realizing how much of Noah's world had existed without him. Noah showed him his room proudly, pointing out his bed, his favorite books, the toy cars lined up with careful precision. Ethan listened intently, absorbing every detail as if memorizing it mattered, as if knowing these things could somehow make up for the years he had missed. That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Lily and Ethan sat quietly at the small kitchen table. The apartment was hushed, the kind of silence that came not from emptiness, but from rest. "I'm not asking you to fix the past," Lily said finally. "I'm asking you to be honest about the future." Ethan met her eyes steadily. "I don't want to be a visitor in his life," he said. "I want to earn my place in it, whatever that looks like." Lily studied him, weighing his words against his actions. For the first time since their reunion, she allowed herself to imagine what it might mean not to carry everything alone. "It won't be easy," she said. "And it won't be quick." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan replied. The words were simple, but they held a depth he had never known how to express before. As he left that night, walking back into the city he once ruled without question, Ethan understood that success no longer meant expansion or recognition. It meant restraint. It meant presence. It meant choosing the slow, uncertain work of becoming someone worthy of trust. And for the first time in his life, that work felt like the most important thing he had ever done. As autumn settled into the city, the shape of their lives continued to shift in subtle but irreversible ways. The days grew shorter, the air sharper, and routines that once felt temporary began to root themselves into something more permanent. Ethan no longer thought of his visits as interruptions to his real life. They had become his real life, quietly redefining what mattered and what no longer did. Noah began to associate certain moments with Ethan's presence. Saturday mornings meant trips to the bakery where he was allowed to choose a pastry almost as big as his hand. Evening sometimes meant slow walks through the neighborhood, Noah's small fingers wrapped around Ethan's, swinging their joined hands without any awareness of how significant that gesture was. Ethan learned the rhythm of Noah's moods, the way he grew quiet when tired, the particular seriousness that appeared when he was concentrating. Lily remained careful, but not distant. She allowed Ethan more access, not because she had decided to forgive him, but because she saw the effect he was having on Noah. Her trust grew not from hope, but from observation. Ethan never missed a scheduled visit. He remembered small details and followed through on promises, even when they were inconvenient or clashed with work obligations he once would have considered non-negotiable. Still, not everything moved smoothly. There were moments when old habits surfaced, when Ethan instinctively tried to take control of situations that required patience rather than direction. One evening, after Noah refused to eat dinner and dissolved into tears, Ethan intervened too quickly, offering solutions that only escalated the situation. Lily stepped in calmly, guiding Noah back to his plate with quiet reassurance. Later, after Noah had fallen asleep, Lily addressed it gently but firmly. "You don't have to fix everything," she said. "Sometimes he just needs to be heard." Ethan absorbed the words without defensiveness. "I'm learning," he replied. "I've spent my whole life solving problems. This feels different." "It is different," Lily said. "It's not about efficiency. It's about presence." That distinction stayed with Ethan. He began to notice how often he equated action with value, how rarely he had allowed himself to simply sit with discomfort. Parenting, he realized, required a kind of humility that success had never taught him. One afternoon, Lily asked Ethan to take Noah to a pediatric appointment. It was a small request, but it carried weight. Sitting in the waiting room with other parents, Ethan felt a strange sense of belonging mixed with quiet guilt. He listened as the doctor asked routine questions, answered carefully, and held Noah's hand during the examination, feeling the trust in that grip settle deep into his bones. Afterward, Noah asked for ice cream, and Ethan said yes without hesitation. They sat together on a bench outside the clinic, the sun low and golden, Noah concentrating intensely on keeping his ice cream from melting too fast. Ethan watched him with a tenderness he no longer tried to suppress. "I like when you come with me," Noah said suddenly. Ethan swallowed. "I like it too." At home that evening, Lily watched them from the kitchen doorway, something unguarded in her expression. For the first time, she saw not a man trying to make amends, but a father forming in real time, imperfect but sincere. That night, after Noah was asleep, Ethan and Lily talked longer than usual. They spoke about logistics, about schedules, about boundaries that needed to be clear. Then the conversation drifted into quieter territory. "I was angry for a long time," Lily admitted. "Not because you left, but because you never looked back." Ethan nodded. "I see that now. And I know saying sorry doesn't undo it." "No," she agreed. "But staying does something else." The word lingered between them. As Ethan left, walking under the streetlights toward his car, he felt the weight of responsibility settle fully onto his shoulders. It was heavier than anything he had ever carried, and yet it felt exactly where it belonged. For the first time, he understood that being needed was not a burden. It was a privilege he intended to protect. Winter arrived quietly, settling over the city with a kind of stillness that made everything feel more exposed. The first snowfall came early one morning, soft and deliberate, transforming streets and rooftops into something gentler than Ethan remembered. It was the kind of morning that slowed people down, forcing them to notice where they stepped and how they moved, and Ethan found that he welcomed it. Slowness no longer frightened him. It felt necessary. Noah was fascinated by the snow. Ethan arrived just after breakfast, his coat still dusted white, and was immediately pulled toward the window by a small hand wrapped eagerly around his fingers. Noah pressed his face to the glass, leaving faint marks as he laughed, already planning snowmen and imaginary adventures. Lily watched from the kitchen, coffee mug cradled in her hands, a faint smile touching her lips before she caught herself. They went outside together, bundled in layers, their breaths visible in the cold air. Ethan helped Noah build a lopsided snowman, patiently packing snow while Noah declared each uneven shape perfect. Lily stood nearby, arms folded, observing the scene with a careful mix of warmth and restraint. There was something almost surreal about it, this quiet domestic moment that had once seemed impossible. Later that afternoon, as they warmed up inside, Lily received a call that changed the atmosphere instantly. Her expression tightened as she listened, her shoulders stiffening. Ethan noticed immediately and waited until she ended the call before asking what was wrong. "It's my mother," Lily said, her voice controlled but strained. "She's not well. They want me to come tonight." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll stay with Noah," he said. Lily looked at him sharply, surprised. "You don't have to." "I want to," Ethan replied simply. She studied him for a long moment, weighing instinct against experience. Finally, she nodded. "All right." The hours that followed were some of the most challenging Ethan had ever faced. Not because Noah was difficult, but because responsibility without supervision felt terrifying in its own way. Dinner had to be prepared, bedtime routines followed, small fears soothed without Lily's familiar presence to anchor them. When Noah asked where his mother was, Ethan knelt beside him and answered honestly, keeping his voice steady. "She had to help someone she loves. She'll be back soon." Noah accepted this with solemn understanding and insisted Ethan read his favorite book twice before sleeping. When he finally drifted off, his hand clutching the edge of Ethan's sleeve, Ethan remained seated beside the bed long after he could have left, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Sitting alone in the quiet apartment later that night, Ethan felt the full weight of what he had almost lost. Not just Lily, not just Noah, but the chance to become someone capable of holding this kind of trust. He realized then that love was not built in moments of joy alone, but in moments of absence, when staying was a choice rather than an expectation. Lily returned close to midnight, exhausted and emotionally drained. She froze when she saw Ethan asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up around him, the apartment peaceful and intact. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking in the evidence of a promise kept without witness. When Ethan woke, embarrassed and apologetic, Lily stopped him with a raised hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken those words to him without reservation. Over the next weeks, the boundaries between them softened almost without notice. Conversations lingered longer. Silences grew comfortable rather than tense. They spoke more openly about fears, about mistakes, about the ways they had both learned to survive separately. Ethan did not ask for forgiveness. He no longer felt entitled to it. He focused instead on earning something else entirely. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Lily sat beside Ethan on the couch, their shoulders almost touching. "I don't know what this is yet," she said carefully. "But I know it's not what it used to be." Ethan nodded. "I don't want it to be." That answer seemed to matter. As winter deepened, something fragile but resilient began to take shape between them. Not a return to the past, but the construction of something new, built slowly from patience, honesty, and the quiet understanding that love, once broken, does not simply return. It grows differently. And for the first time, both of them were willing to let it. Spring arrived almost unnoticed, as if the world itself had decided not to rush what was finally beginning to feel right. The snow melted slowly, revealing sidewalks and parks that looked different now, familiar yet altered by the passage of time. With the change of seasons came a sense of quiet renewal, not dramatic or loud, but steady and deeply felt. Ethan no longer counted his visits in days or weeks. He lived them. Mornings often began together now, with Noah insisting on helping make breakfast, carefully cracking eggs under watchful eyes and laughing when shells inevitably fell into the bowl. Ethan learned to slow his movements, to let mistakes happen without correction, to allow joy to exist without productivity attached to it. These moments, once unimaginable, had become the foundation of his days. Lily watched this transformation with a mix of wonder and caution. She had spent years building a life that did not rely on anyone else, learning to trust her own strength above all. Letting someone in now required a different kind of courage, one that did not come with guarantees. Still, she could not deny what she saw. Ethan was present in ways that mattered, showing up not just when it was easy, but when it required patience, humility, and sacrifice. The conversation that changed everything happened one quiet evening after Noah had fallen asleep. The apartment was filled with soft light and the low hum of the city outside. Lily sat at the table, turning a mug slowly between her hands, while Ethan stood nearby, uncertain but attentive. "I don't want to live in fear anymore," Lily said finally. "Not fear of being left, and not fear of hoping." Ethan met her gaze, his expression open, unguarded. "I can't undo the past," he said. "But I can choose every day not to repeat it." They talked long into the night, about boundaries and expectations, about mistakes that still hurt and dreams that felt almost dangerous to voice. There were no grand promises, no declarations meant to erase pain. There was only honesty, offered carefully and received with equal care. Weeks later, they took Noah to the park where everything had begun. He ran ahead of them, carefree, his laughter echoing through the trees as he chased pigeons without success. Lily and Ethan walked side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, neither pulling away. Noah stopped suddenly and turned to them, his expression serious in a way that reminded Ethan painfully of how observant children could be. "You're both here," he said, as if stating something important. "Yes," Lily answered softly. "And you stay," Noah added, looking directly at Ethan. "I will," Ethan replied without hesitation. That was the moment Lily allowed herself to believe him fully. Life did not become perfect. There were disagreements, moments of uncertainty, days when old fears resurfaced without warning. But there was also something stronger now, something resilient. Trust, once shattered, had been rebuilt not through words, but through time, presence, and the willingness to remain even when it would have been easier to walk away. Ethan adjusted his life permanently, stepping back from the relentless pace that once defined him. Success took on a new meaning, measured not by growth charts or profits, but by bedtime stories read without distraction and mornings spent together rather than apart. For the first time, his achievements felt connected to something real. On a warm spring afternoon, as they sat together watching Noah play, Lily leaned slightly against Ethan's shoulder. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried more weight than any spoken promise. Ethan did not move. He simply stayed. Sometimes people believe that love is something you find once and hold on to forever without effort. But real love asks more. It asks for accountability, patience, and the courage to change. Ethan had once believed he had no children. He had been wrong. He had a son. And finally, he had a family. Not because life gave him a second chance easily, but because he chose, every day, not to waste it.